Hi. Like most things in astrology, there are different schools of thought and different approaches, and this is also true of the task of understanding human relationships. One approach is to create what's called a composite chart, and this is where the time, date and place of both participants are calculated together to form or produce a new chart, the chart between them, as it were. I tend to prefer a different approach, one called Synastry, where the different elements of each person's astrological chart are compared to one another directly. So we look at someone's moon and find out it's in harmony with someone else's Jupiter, then we know that there's a good mood. And the reason for doing this in astrology is that obviously, we are sophisticated, complex human beings. I know some people might seem simple, and I'm sure I've met people who seem to live as if they're trying to resist evolution. But we are complex creatures. We have different layers to our being. And that's exactly what we explore in human relationships with astrology. Two people might be attracted to one another. That's fantastic. But what happens if someone's home background clashes with another person's religion? Or, two people might be physically attracted but find that one person's music drives the other person absolutely nuts. So I like him, but I can't stand that sound. We can get on with each other, we can get on with each other's families, but what if we don't like their friends? You get these kind of areas, you see. So it's not to suggest that relationships between human beings are impossible. Some of them might seem so, but I think that there are, avenues of negotiation and compromise somewhere. But looking at the astrology between them allows you to identify which areas flow most easily, which areas where there might be challenges. And remember that the word challenge does not mean the same as impossibility. So, you can adjust and negotiate, maybe change things in yourself, change things in the other person. And then, of course, that begs the question, well, why should I change myself in order to get someone to like me? Because you like them enough. So, oddly enough, if we love someone enough, we will compromise and we will want to make changes, because having them in our lives is more important than holding on to some kind of idea of what we want it to be. Whilst at the same time, being loved for who we are, without having to change anything at all, that's the best thing of all. So, looking at the astrological configurations between people, you can tell which parts or which facets of life they'll flow easily already to begin with, and where there might be need challenges. To sum it all up as a whole and say this relationship is on, this relationship is off, is sometimes very complicated to do. The process of comparing the two charts takes time. What I like to do when I do this with people is to not just look at the dynamics between them, but to explain each person to themselves a little bit, and explain each other to each other a little bit as well. For example, years ago I met a couple who were about 19 years old, and she had moon in Cancer and he had moon in Sagittarius. So whenever they became upset or vulnerable, she'd respond in a Cancerian manner and he'd respond to an upset in a Sagittarian manner. Regardless of their sun signs, this was their emotional nature. So in a domestic argument between the two of them, her moon in Cancer would want to cling and hold on, and his moon in Sagittarius would want to go off for a walk, because in her reality, if you love someone, you hold on to them. But in his reality, you display love by creating space, going off and having a walk, thinking about it, being philosophical, which you can't do if someone's holding your trouser leg while you're trying to get out the door. So I explained each other's kind of way of being to each other, not even relating the charts back and forth, but just, it's like, this is Henrietta meet Jeff, this is Jeff meet Henrietta, but on a deeper level. And so once she understood that he had an emotional need to go for a walk in space, and that him moving off wasn't abandonment, and once he understood that her need to cling on wasn't an attempt to suffocate and control, but it was just, a frightened person clinging on for dear life, then they sort of had this tacit arrangement where when they had an upset, she'd hold a cushion and he'd go near the door. And they both understood that what was happening, you know. And because they had an understanding of each other, it meant that they could take it into account. So all of a sudden her behaviour didn't seem controlling to him, and all of a sudden his behaviour didn't seem like, you know, he's trying to run away as fast as possible to her. On my website, I explain the dynamics of human relationships in a little bit more detail, and give an example. We look at the two charts of Princess Diana and Prince Charles, and I go through them in a brief way, kind of point by point. It's like speed synastry. And so I'd recommend like having a look at that page if you want to find out a little bit more about what's the process of comparing the two charts, and what are the different areas that are looked at. You know, so it's not just whether or not people are attracted to another. We look at how they communicate. You know, so two people can go, yeah, like you, but they have a communication mismatch, maybe. So all of that's all written out. I'll put a direct link with this video clip so you can go straight to it. But if that doesn't work, or for some reason it doesn't appear, then if you go to www.davidrowan.co.uk, choose option A, which is the solar system navigation, and then put the cursor over the planet Uranus and click it, and a circle will pop up, and in that circle is a list of things, one of which is astrology. So click on astrology, and then from astrology, private consultations, and in the private consultations list you'll find relationship astrology, and click on that. If you've got any questions and you want to write, then astrology@davidrowan.co.uk will get you to my Outlook box. So yes, so human relationships, it is a difficult thing to kind of manage sometimes. Occasionally you find that, you know, if a relationship is 70% okay and it's only 30% a problem, is not bad enough to warrant leaving, but it's not good enough to warrant staying. And people do get into these kind of situations. And so looking at the astrology can actually help. You know, if a person's contemplating or considering taking the step of moving in. So they already know they're attracted, but what are they like in committed circumstances? Because when we meet, presumably, there's a courtship, which means you're meeting in the realm of romance. And that's not the same as the realm of commitment. In astrology, we distinguish the two. Because one can observe, you can have lots of romance without any commitment, and also you can have lots of commitment without any romance. You know, they don't necessarily always go together. So different parts of an astrological chart tell us about the dynamics that a person encounters or experiences in either of those realms. So if two people are getting on well in a romantic sense, will they get on well in, you know, a commitment sense? What happens when the unconscious dynamics and the values of each individual attempt to merge and blend with one another? You know, because it's not until you're actually in it, swooshing around in another person's values, proclivities, habits, and daily ways of living, that you really get to find out what it's like to be there. So astrology can be used to kind of assess the territory ahead. It's like sending in scouts before you go over the horizon. It can be quite a beneficial thing to do. So if you want to have a look at that, you have any questions about it, be more than happy to ask. And I'll answer anything you want to know. All right? I hope this short little brief thing has told you a little bit about the dynamics of relationships. And I know the previous one that looks at symbols of love might just raise a question or two of, well, this is about, you know, loving nature, or the nature of our loving. What happens, you know, between me and them? And there's a possible way of looking. All right? Thank you. See you later. Bye.